Hello everyone and welcome for joining me today. I'm going to give the key points, some stories and different things from a book called The Mussar Movement. So this is a book by Rabbi Dov Katz, Volume 1, Part 2. And it's basically about Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. So I'll give a quick history. So this is a search from Perplexity. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, Yisrael ben Zev Wolf Lipkin, lived from 1809 to 1883, was a renowned 19th century Lithuanian rabbi, Talmudist, and the founder of the Mussar movement, an influential movement within Orthodox Judaism focused on ethical discipline and character development. He was born in Zagar in Lithuania. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter studied in Salanter, which gave him the name Salanter. His great influences included Rabbi Yosef Zunel of Salant, who encouraged the study of Mussar ethical teachings. Salanter saw the need for spiritual and ethical revival within the Jewish community of Lithuania, leading him to found the Mussar movement, dedicated to the study and internalization of Jewish moral teachings. He established the first Mussar society, the Chevra Mussar, in Vilna, and introduced a Mussar shtib, or small synagogues devoted to ethical study in Kovno. His approach encouraged students to actively repeat and internalize ethical maxims, aiming to transform both conscious and subconscious character traits. Key disciples such as Rabbi Simcha Zessel Ziv and Rabbi Yerucham Libovich transmitted his teachings to future generations. Rabbi Salanter moved to Germany later in life, spreading his teachings in Western Europe and maintaining connections across the Jewish world. His ethical insights, outreach activities, and principles of Mussar movement profoundly shaped the ethical and spiritual methodology of many yeshivot, Jewish academies, particularly in Lithuania and beyond. He is celebrated for his profound piety, intellectual vigor, and his efforts to foster character refinement as a central part of Jewish religious life. Rabbi Salanter's Yortzei anniversary of death is on the 25th of Shevat, and he remains a revered figure in Jewish history. So let's go into actually the content of the book. So the main doctrines. Fear of God is profound wisdom and acquired with strenuous effort, such as human drives, research of methods, and learning halacha. Essential nature of a person is a clear and luminous force. Otherwise, own as a subconscious, the inner self of one personality. In other words, the subconscious and inner self of one personality. Mussar books on fear of heaven cannot be studied to be mastered, but to leave an impression and to be repeated over and over to penetrate one's heart. This would be ingrained in the subconscious and capable of resisting one's instinctive inclinations. Torah study also finds and purifies human nature. This approach bears affinity to the French thinker Aimé Coué, who lived in 1867 to 1926, built a psychology and repetitive recitation called autosuggestion in modern parlance. He talks about, in his time, people did not fear death. Alas, nowadays in 2025, he believed fear of God and Mussar can defeat the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara. The way to stimulate enthusiasm and repetitive Mussar dicta, as explained earlier, with the addition of emotional excitement. This means choosing ideas which will move him or her emotionally, a melody to be added which engenders emotional response. He describes the conscious eye, the mental eye, thinks and comprehends the subconscious eye of the senses like two separate identities. Eye, the rational mind, sees eternal reward and punishment. Eye of the senses has no feeling for them. Therefore, these concepts do not frighten or cause him or her to recoil at them. However, conjuring images perceptible to the senses, then the heart can be penetrated. He complained the world mistakenly regards Mussar study reserved for the higher saintly human being. He felt Mussar was an essential cure for all spiritual sickness. This is for all people, for example, women who are exempt from Torah study. His Mussar program. He held that every Jew is responsible to set aside time for Mussar study, consisting of one theoretical study of Mussar, working for the purpose of knowledge and the understanding of the science and fear of God, and 2, emotionally charged repetition of Mussar dicta for the purpose of stimulation and impression. He advocated for Mussar houses for study and as a spiritual infirmary. Someone come individually for spiritual stock-taking, pouring out his or her heart, or in groups at set times to vent freely sad thoughts, purifying the heart and souls, giving emotionally stimulating discourses to the others. They would be most frequented on a Shabbos afternoon with Marv until dark. Character traits. One of Rabbi Yisrael's goals was that character traits were amongst the most important considerations of all, even more than transgression. They were both seen as a prerequisite for Torah, both intellectually and action. He stated this also applied to halacha, and so rid him or herself of all desire and prejudice. Everyone is able to subdue and change their evil traits. This is done through study and is a craft. Moreover, a conscious, arduous, mental and emotional task. He draws a distinction between this area of Torah and others. Her good traits to be embodied is his existence, not merely an intellectual thought system. He divided character training into suppression and correction of character traits. Suppression means having strong mental control over their faculties, which forces drives to conform to intelligence. Correction is changing his or her nature and rectify the traits toward good and beautiful. The second is more important, as the first would mean an ongoing war. And from the Cheshbon HaNefesh, he lists 13 virtuous traits. So I'm just going to read them from the book. The 13 virtuous traits in the following categories: truth, not to utter anything to which one's heart did not testify is true. 2, alacrity, not to be idle for an instant and to do all that was required. 3, resolution, to do whatever one decided and to do it energetically and not apathetically. 4, respect, carefully to treat every person with all due respect, even a person with whom one does not agree. 5, tranquility, always to be relaxed, never confused, doing everything without tension. 6, to be soft-spoken, the words of the wise spoken softly are listened to, hence one should strive to speak in this manner. 7, cleanliness, to be clean and immaculate in body and clothing. 8, patience, patiently to bear every mishap in life. 9, order, to be orderly and systematic in all of one's actions and affairs. 10, humility, to recognize one's own and to divert one's attention from the next person's limitation. 11, righteous, in its plain sense, in its derived implication, to forego your own interests. 12, frugality, not to waste a penny. 13, silence, to consider what benefit his words would bring before he utters them. Wisdom. So read a little bit about wisdom. It says here about wisdom. Secular scholars and scientists have also come to realize that human thoughts are subject to personal influences and are not at all objective. Even pure science no longer presumes to reveal absolute truth. All scientific conclusions are derived from the commonly accepted hypothesis functioning as premises and termed axioms. These axioms, however, are not regarded by science as absolute truth, nor is science compelled to accept any particular axiom. It can only demand that logically consistent conclusions be drawn from the particular axioms, while the axioms themselves are left to the choice of the research scientist and depend upon his psychological inclination to choose whatever is convenient for him and fits in best with his needs and conceptions. It follows, then, that the foundation of science rests upon the personal predilections and tendencies of the scientist, and the same applies to the views and assumptions held by individuals and society as a whole. Rabbi Yisrael substantiated his contention by reference to Talmudic and Midrashic dicta, showing how far the slightest bias can pervert the mind of man, etc. Deeds. Deeds are not evaluated by the physical act, but by the circumstances of the individual performing, such as one's character, mood, time, and place. Rabbi Yisrael quotes the Rambam And I'll read a quote directly from the book. To the Rambam, this evaluation takes into account not the number but the magnitude of merits and iniquities. There may be a single merit that outweighs many, and there may be one iniquity that counterbalances many merits. And also in Avos chapter 5, the reward is commensurate to the effort. The value of the deed would be probing deeply into the mind, and only Hashem can do this. He asserted that abstinence was a virtue regarding on oneself, regarding others, to be aware of earthly existence, helping and being sociable to them. Another's bodily needs are our spiritual matters. By doing good to the next person's body, one does good to his own soul. Personality. No one was able to comprehend this entirely. This remained concealed like a mystery. And just a quote from Rav Kook that he said about him. Rav Kook had observed, whatever is written about the greatness of this giant, so obviously talking about Rabbi Yisrael, of this great giant among giants, the mighty in saintliness, glorious among the most prominent Torah personalities of the generation just past, is inadequate to convey any idea or significant fraction of his glorious holiness and greatness. Having expressed his admiration, Rav Kook declared it a holy obligation to undertake a profound study of the glory of this renowned God, who restored the crown of the true fear of God to the territory of Israel. Mission. His aim in life was spiritual perfection. He regarded ethical perfection as man's purpose on earth. This goal would be from lifelong sustained, intense and sustained exertion. He was also assiduous to the extreme with Torah study, which he did day and night. There are many stories of his lengthy preoccupations with his thoughts. At times, he would isolate himself completely from the company of men and seclude himself in some hidden corner to enable him to delve more deeply into his inner personality. And I'm going to give one of the stories from the book. So the story is as follows. Having returned from one of his journeys to Memel, he entered the hotel where he was accustomed to lodge. He noticed a change in the hotel keeper's attitude to Judaism, and the latter lost all respect for Torah and mitzvah. Asked the reason for the change, the hotel keeper told Rabbi Yisrael that a skeptic had been there a few days earlier and had denied in his presence that there was reward and punishment. To prove his point, he sent out for some non-kosher salami and declared that if there was divine reward and punishment, the salami should stick to it in his throat and choke him to death. The skeptic ate the salami and nothing happened. He blatantly denied the existence of divine providence. Ever since then, the hotel keeper had been confused. His faith had been shaken, making no attempt to answer. Rabbi Yisrael retired to his room. A few hours later, the hotel keeper's daughter came home from school. She told her father that she had received her report card and had earned 2 distinctions, one in mathematics, the other in singing. Rabbi Yisrael called in the girl to his room. He asked her to be so kind as to sing for him, to prove that she had really deserved the distinction. The girl refused. Rabbi Yisrael sent for her father. He complained that the daughter was ill-mannered and had refused his request. Astonished, the father asked his daughter how she could have the audacity to disobey Rabbi Yisrael. She replied that on the contrary, she considered it ill-mannered and unreasonable suddenly to be called on to stand up and sing at the wrong time in the wrong place in order to prove her singing ability. Was it reasonable that she should be compelled to demonstrate her abilities to any and every person who refused to accept the evidence of the certificate? Were she to do so, she would look mad. After all, she had been awarded a certificate, and whoever wanted verification would have the opportunity to obtain it at the proper time. Her argument impressed her father, and he agreed with her. Rabbi Yisrael sent the girl from the room. Then he turned to the father and said that his daughter's reply was the answer to his question about divine providence. Had not God already proved his providence by the revealed miracles of the Exodus? And we have a certificate attesting to this, the Torah, which was given to us. Similarly, God had demonstrated his providence in the encounter of Elijah with the prophets of Baal. Then all the people had fallen on their faces and cried, "The Lord, he is God." So too the hand of God was evident in the days of Mordechai and Esther, in the miracles of the Hasmonean, and in many other historical events. It is reasonable then that for every fool who suddenly appears and declares that he does not believe, God should change the order of creation and the course of nature in order to prove that divine judgment does exist. Furthermore, there will be no end. Every day someone else will come. One will say, if there's reward and punishment, let me choke on tray food. Another, if there's divine providence, let me fall from my horse on Shabbat. And so on ad infinitum. Whoever wishes to discover the existence of God need only examine our eternal certificate confirmed before the eyes of all the world. There is no need for any additional proofs. And I was just going to read another story about, well, not a story, just this paragraph I thought was quite good. Financial well-being and physical confidence played no part in his life. Many opportunities came his way to achieve material success in both wealth and prestige. High positions were offered to him, which would have brought him prosperity and the good life, in the usual sense of the word. Many affluent individuals wanted to allocate substantial sums of money to him and maintain him in comfort. Among them, Sir Moses Montefiore, the Hirsch-Halberstadt brothers, the Feinberg heirs of Königsberg, and the like. He, however, rejected all offers out of hand. He refused to accept any position of honour, the only exception being his first in Vilna, which he did accept for a short period of time only. He did not accept gifts. All his days lived poorly and in strained circumstances. He never owned any property and hardly glanced at the shape of a coin. All his financial affairs were conducted by his wife. When she died, he found among her belongings a bundle of coins laboriously saved from the household expense money. These Rabbi Yisrael refused to touch and distribute them among the poor. He did not even buy Sepharim, holy books, his only real need in life, and depended always upon borrowed volumes. He even refused to change his talit, which had become frayed and worn by constant use. A wealthy man came to see Rabbi Yisrael in Königsberg. Displeased by Rabbi Yisrael's quarters and standard of living, he expressed his desire to help Rabbi Yisrael, but Rabbi Yisrael categorically refused to accept any favors. Sometime later, the same wealthy individual was standing near Rabbi Yisrael in the synagogue. He noticed the worn condition of Rabbi Yisrael's talit. He approached Rabbi Yisrael's acquaintances and asked him to obtain Rabbi Yisrael's consent, at least for him to buy a new talit. This would add adornment to the mitzvah performed by Rabbi Yisrael. He begged Rabbi Yisrael and many times tried to persuade him to accept. Were God to grant me some windfall, the man said, the first item I would buy would be a new talit. So would I, Rabbi Yisrael answered in the same vein, but in jest, were God to provide me some profit, I would also buy myself a beautiful talit. A story about his character. So I'll tell you the story. While he was occupied his position in Rabbi Melino's yeshiva in Vilna, a student once propounded a very difficult question while Rabbi Yisrael was in the middle of delivering his discourse. The student had attended the lecture for the express purpose of disconcerting Rabbi Yisrael. Admitting that this question might indeed render his thesis invalid, Rabbi Yisrael descended from the bimah. He subsequently disclosed to his students that 5 answers had occurred to him, which would undoubtedly have silenced his questioner, but he himself knew that they were not really valid, and the questioner had indeed been in the right. So he refrained from offering any rebuttal. He added, "Do not think it was easy for me. Many considerations, the honor of the Torah, my ability to influence others, etc., welled up within me to convince me that to answer would have been permissible and to refute the questioner, even by utilizing an answer that would not be absolutely true. But I put my foot down and rebuked myself. Yisrael, you study Mussar, and so I acknowledged the truth and descended immediately from the bimah." And it's a little story about his character. I found this one particularly interesting because it explains the different psychologies of some of Rabbi Yisrael's approach and character to the Hasidic rabbis of the time. So there was an encounter. Well, I'll read all of this with the rabbis. It's quite interesting. A number of interesting anecdotes to the extent described encounter between Rabbi Yisrael and the great contemporaneous Hasidic rabbis, all of which bring out his own nature and approach. Once he happened to occupy lodgings in the same building in the Russian capital of St. Petersburg as the Lubavitcher Rebbe at the time, Rabbi Shmuel Samuel Schneerson. The door of the Rebbe's suite did not remain still for a second. People kept coming and going, one person to ask for a bracha, another to obtain advice, a third merely to catch a glimpse of the Rebbe himself. Gabayim and Shemashim were moving hither and thither to control the crowd and maintain order and decorum. Towards evening, large numbers of Hasidim would gather, listen to a discourse by the Rebbe on Hasidic doctrine, sing melodies, and pray with demonstrative fervor. Upon occasion, they would join hands and dance together. The entire street was afire with tumult and exultation. The Rebbe was delighted to find some dynamic of Judaism in St. Petersburg. Rabbi Yisrael's room was completely silent. The door was closed. No one came or went. He sat alone in seclusion, studying some Mussar text. Once, apparently by mistake, the Rebbe opened Rabbi Yisrael's door. He stood transfixed. When Rabbi Yisrael stood up and asked what the Rebbe might be wanting, he answered, "I'm not looking for you, sir. I'm looking for your Lithuanian Jews. Where in the world should they be, if not in your company?" Here Rabbi Samuel found the opportunity to speak his mind. He used to declare that the Holy One, blessed be, had decided after a number of generations to take pity on the unhappy Misnagim. He brought down from heaven to them a Rebbe's soul in the person of Rabbi Yisrael Salant. Yet the poor Misnagim failed to take advantage of the opportunity. Rabbi Yisrael, on the other hand, deliberately shunned crowds and tumult. He avoided all the trappings of glory. His outlook was that influence did not emanate from noise, nor success or from tumult. Instead, it was communicated quietly by the soft voice within, aroused in the human heart during solitude and inner concentration, by calm and penetrating reflection, and by slow and persistent spiritual delving. Indeed, he felt that he did possess the soul of a Rebbe, and that he performed the same function as a Rebbe, but he recoiled from the Rebbe's outward cloak. He chose simplicity and modesty, calm and quiet, as a means for carrying his influence. There was another encounter between Rabbi Yisrael and the Rebbe. This took place at one of the spas in Germany. Here again, the divergent paths became evident. All the tourists would come to the resort to drink the health-giving waters. Because of the distinguished personages who patronized the spa every day, everyone was obliged to remove his hat upon entering the enclosure. The Rebbe asked Rabbi Yisrael how he had overcome this difficulty, namely the obligation to go bareheaded. Rabbi Yisrael acknowledged that there was a problem. Here, however, he was acting under the coercion, and the Torah exempts one who acts under compulsion. The Rebbe, however, showed Rabbi Yisrael the wig he was wearing. Ostensibly bareheaded, he did have a head covering. Indeed, he informed Rabbi Yisrael he had ordered the wig expressly for this purpose. He would don it whenever he went to the spa. Rabbi Yisrael was incapable of affording such a luxury. Were he to spend money on the wig, he told the Rebbe, he would not have had the money to pay the hotel bill and would have had to accept favors from the community. The Rebbe would travel from his lodgings to the spa in a magnificent carriage drawn by a team of horses and occupied by the retinue of Hasidim. Rabbi Yisrael would go alone and on foot. This gave rise to astonishment among the Hasidim. It was also whispered that Rabbi Yisrael was not at all pleased with the Rebbe's carriage. People began searching for the reason, looking for some prohibition that might be involved in riding in the carriage. It occurred to them that Rabbi Yisrael might suspect the presence of shatnez, a mixture of woolen linen in the upholstery. When this came to the Rebbe's notice, he replied that the author of the Shevet Yaakov had declared this permissible. Subsequently, when driving to the spa, the Rebbe encountered Rabbi Yisrael going on foot in the same direction. He invited Rabbi Yisrael to enter the carriage. Jokingly, he added that it was better to rely on the Shevet Yaakov than on one's legs. Characteristically, it had never occurred to anyone with the particular observance of the minutiae of custom that Rabbi Yisrael was concerned instead with a question of pride and arrogance. He could not conceive it possible for anyone to live so lavishly, surrounded by princely splendor, without falling prey to the feelings of pride, or at least without one's humility becoming affected. Some even add that Rabbi Yisrael replied in this vein to the Rebbe's invitation to step into the carriage. To this remark, the Rebbe replied that this was the only way in which to achieve humility, to live in regal court, and to receive the honor preferred to kings, to travel in expensive carriages, and to utilize the services of Gabayim and Shemashim, and to remain, notwithstanding, humble and modest. A saint avoiding hurt. Rabbi Yisrael's greatness was manifested in human relations. His entire attention was concentrated upon how to afford gratification to others, to do good to and to them and avoiding offending their dignity and damaging their property. He would weigh his actions observing kosher mishpat. And a little bit about his kindness. What is most surprising is that with all his great public endeavors worldwide in scope, he never forgot the needs of the individual, the personal anxieties of each and every human being. Usually prominent personalities preoccupied with public needs and comprehensive public endeavor have no time for the problems of individuals. The great do not regard it worthwhile to dissipate their energies in dealing with such insignificant matters. Solicitous as Rabbi Yisrael was, however, for the welfare of the community masses vitally affecting its survival, he nevertheless refused to dismiss the smallest matter affecting an individual. Moreover, even in his major public endeavors, he intended above all to bring benefit to each and every individual in the community. He spared neither his time nor his dignity to help each individual, rich or poor, old or young, child or infant. He inclined his ear to catch the sigh of every downcast and unhappy person. He would delve into their problems so as to afford them proper counsel and lighten their suffering. With all his greatness, he was never too lazy to visit individuals in the home and to meet people whenever he saw some possibility of some good resulting therefrom. Neither rain nor snow deterred him and deflected him from his path. He traveled to distant localities if he deemed it possible to accomplish some good on behalf of some person or other. And where he found it impossible to offer any actual tangible help, he would try at least to offer encouragement by raising spirits and cheering people up. And a story here about the lottery. Where did I see this? Once his wife bought a lottery ticket. When Rabbi Yisrael heard what she had done, he was quite distraught. Someone related that he immediately summoned two witnesses and solemnly declared in their presence that he renounced all right to her possession, the fruits of and fruits of the fruits thereof forever. He was afraid that she might win, and he would become rich. And he believed that when God bestowed wealth upon a person, it was not for his personal benefit alone. Instead, the person thereby became a charity treasurer, appointed to dispense charity to the poor and needy. Now, who would be prepared to assume so grave a responsibility? Who could search into every nook and cranny where some poor man might be located, perhaps even at the end of the city, who needed to be extricated from his impoverished circumstances, or some sick person who needed help from inner suffering? Who could know whether some poor child did not exist somewhere, for whom he would be obliged to engage a teacher to educate him in Torah and train him to observe mitzvah? He had no desire to be put to the test, and so he renounced all right to the lottery ticket. And a story here when he gave a speech. Listen to one of Rabbi Yisrael's speeches. A synagogue woman believed that Rabbi Yisrael's reproof was directed at him personally. In the middle of the address, he publicly denounced Rabbi Yisrael and reviled him. Rabbi Yisrael made no reply. He merely continued with his remarks. This infuriated the warden even more, and after having exhausted his stock of insults, he stalked out of the synagogue and slammed the door closed. To the astonishment of his audience, Rabbi Yisrael ran down the bimah in pursuit of the warden. Having caught up with him, Rabbi Yisrael drew a handkerchief from his pocket and began mopping the warden's brow, saying to him, "Admittedly, you're angry at me, but you are perspiring heavily. How could you go out in the draft and endanger your health?" The warden was visibly moved by this gesture. Rabbi Yisrael then endeavored to assure the warden that he did not know him and certainly never could have had him in mind. The warden now accepted his explanation and they became firm and enduring friends. And just at the very end, the end of the epilogue, I'll read that because I think it gives a good summary. The Almighty surveys all the generations and endows each epoch with great personalities who become beacons shedding their light and illuminating the way for human beings to follow. These company figures emerge, they size up the condition of their age and open up new horizons for the fertilization of Jewish thought and expression, and infuse new blood and strength in the arteries of the internal people, thus assuring its survival and revival. One of the bright stars of the Jewish firmament of our times was Rabbi Yisrael of Salant. He was a remarkable genius, a creative thinker, and a leader among men, all at the same time. He was also revolutionary in his style of thinking and manner of action. He exposed himself, and the light was shed upon Israel, the light of the revival movement in Judaism, a movement for the complete return to its source and halachot, a movement for reinforcing of the consciousness of the people and of molding their outlook on the principles and values of Judaism, a movement of new educational methods, all suited to the condition and spirit of the epoch. His gigantic personality served as a symbol of human perfection. He trained a group of disciples and admirers, impressed his mark upon his contemporaries, and constituted the lighthouse for generations to come. Thank you for listening, and I hope this was helpful.